They didn't stab him, they didn't even touch him. They built a wall. And behind it, one of Sparta's greatest war heroes listened as his world became smaller, brick by brick. He could hear them outside, men grunting, rock grinding, sand falling, his breath getting louder. And then one more sound. Footsteps. An old woman walking forward. His mother. She lifted a stone and added it to the wall. This gets worse. Because the man trapped inside that temple wasn't some disgraced nobody. He was the Spartan who had helped save Greece from Persia. The same civilization he protected decided he was too dangerous to leave alive. So what could a man possibly do to make Sparta bury its own champion? C3. That answer starts on a battlefield covered in dust, broken spears, and men waiting to die. And by the end, you'll understand something deeply uncomfortable. Sparta may not have killed Pausanias because he betrayed the state. They may have killed him because he understood exactly how power really works. 479 BC, Plataea. Morning light over Boeotia, a plain full of tension so thick it almost looks physical. On one side, the Persian war machine vast, glittering, multinational, terrifying. On the other, a Greek alliance already coming apart before the battle even begins. Different cities, different commanders, different egos, arguments over position, water, timing, who takes the worst ground, supply lines thinning, nerves fraying, the kind of coalition that can collapse from one bad order. And standing in the middle of all of it was a man who was not even supposed to be the main character. Pausanias was only a regent, holding power for Leonidas's young heir, Pleistarchus. A placeholder, a substitute, a name standing in for a dead legend. But what does a substitute become after he saves the world? Persian cavalry had already cut the Greeks off from water. Night movements went wrong. Units drifted apart in darkness. By dawn, Spartan forces were dangerously exposed, and Mardonius, the Persian commander, veteran of invasion, close to Xerxes himself, saw weakness. So he hit the Spartans hard, not later, not cautiously. Now, here is the detail that matters. While Persian missiles hammered the line, Pausanias did not order the attack. Not yet. He waited for sacrificial signs. He waited while shields shook. He waited while men bled. Imagine being in that line, arrows snapping into wood, dust in your mouth, friends collapsing beside you, and your commander still refusing to move. Would you call that faith or madness? Then the omen turned, and everything changed. The Spartans surged forward. Bronze hit wicker, spears punched through linen armor. The Persian front folded under close combat it hated and could not control. Mardonius went down in the chaos. Once he fell, the center broke. And when the center broke, the empire's invasion broke with it. By the end of that day, Pausanias was no longer borrowing glory from Leonidas. He had manufactured his own, and he made sure the world saw it. At Delphi, a victory monument went up. Ancient tradition remembers him attaching his own name too boldly to the triumph, as if Plataea belonged first to Pausanias and only second to Greece. That detail matters whether every word of it is exact or not, because it captures how people around him started reading his behavior, not as service, as self-coronation. That is the first transformation, and maybe the most important, because victory doesn't just reward a man, it rewires him. It whispers a dangerous sentence directly into the ego. You were right when everyone else was afraid. You waited. You judged. You won. Maybe ordinary rules are for ordinary men. And Sparta hated ordinary pride. Sparta could tolerate courage. It could tolerate brutality. It could even tolerate failure. What it could not tolerate was a Spartan becoming larger than Sparta itself. And Pausanias had just done exactly that. At first, everything still looked glorious. The Persians were beaten back, but not erased. There were garrisons to crush, islands to secure, choke points to seize. So the Greeks sent Pausanias forward again. Cyprus. Then Byzantium, the city that sat like a hand around the throat of trade between Europe and Asia. Whoever held it controlled movement, money, grain, leverage. And now Pausanias held it. That should have been the height of his career. Instead, it was the beginning of the rot. Reports started leaking back to Greece, not battlefield disasters, not cowardice. Something more disturbing to Spartan ears. He was changing. The rough commander from Plataea was now appearing in Persian-style dress. He surrounded himself with bodyguards who didn't feel Spartan. Banquets replaced austerity. Distance replaced camaraderie. Command became theatre. The allies who had once followed him now watched him with suspicion, not because he was weak, because he was starting to look like the kind of ruler Greeks claimed to despise. And here's the psychological trap of sudden power. When a man spends years under discipline, then suddenly gains command over cities, fleets, prisoners, and tribute, his identity can split. One part still hears old rules. The other part starts asking a forbidden question: why should I live like everyone else when I've already proven I am not everyone else? That question destroys people, especially men who have already tasted worship. Then the prisoners vanished. High-ranking Persians had fallen into Pausanias' hands at Byzantium. Noble prisoners. Political currency. Men who could be ransomed, traded, or used. Instead, they were quietly released. No proper consultation. No clean explanation. Just absence. A disappearance that smelled like a private negotiation. Sparta noticed. So did everyone else. Because releasing enemy nobles for no visible gain leaves only one possibility. He expected payment later. But payment in what? Gold, protection, a crown, or something far worse? Ancient accounts disagree on details, but the suspicion hardened around one terrifying idea. Pausanias was communicating with Persian power brokers, possibly through Artabazus, and offering something massive in return for personal advancement. Some stories say he even wanted marriage into the king's family. Think about that ambition for a second. Not survival. Not wealth. Entrance into the bloodline of the empire he had once helped destroy. Why would a Spartan want that? Because some men don't just want victory. They want recognition from the biggest throne on earth. And that hunger has no ceiling, Sparta recalled him. He obeyed. That alone is eerie. A commander in possession of ships, prestige, and a strategic city simply returns when told. Why? Maybe he believed they had nothing solid. Maybe he believed Plataea had made him untouchable. Maybe he still underestimated the one machine colder than Persia, Sparta's state mind. He stood trial and walked. No proof, no conviction, no clean case. That should have felt like survival. Instead, it was the beginning of social death, because in Sparta, acquittal did not restore intimacy. It only proved they could not yet strike keenly. The suspicion stayed in the room. The glances changed. The old certainty around him thinned. A man can survive a formal accusation more easily than he can survive becoming permanently watchable. But acquittal is not the same as trust. He was not restored to command. That matters, because the vacuum he left would help Athens tighten control over the alliance that became the Delian League. While Sparta hesitated, Athens learned how to lead overseas. One man's instability was tilting the balance of the Greek world. Pausanias lost Byzantium, lost official authority, lost the clean path back into Spartan respectability. And when proud men lose legitimate power, they often reach for illegitimate versions of it. So he went back east anyway, without permission, with private initiative, a single vessel, a personal network, independent movement. Not enough to found an empire, just enough to imply he still believed he could act above instruction. That may be the most dangerous stage in any political downfall, when a disgraced man still has enough prestige to imagine a comeback, but not enough legitimacy to make it openly. Sparta summoned him again. He returned again. But this time, the accusations widened. And this is where the story stops being about vanity and starts becoming existential. Rumors spread that Pausanias was not only talking to Persia, he was also reaching toward the helots. If that word means nothing to you, here is the nightmare. The helots were the massive unfree labor population under Spartan domination. They farmed the land, fed the soldiers, carried the system on their backs. And they outnumbered Spartan citizens so dramatically that the entire Spartan way of life was built on permanent fear. Not fear of foreign invasion, fear of internal revolt. Sparta trained boys to become hard, yes, but it also trained itself to stay paranoid. Because underneath every shield wall was a simple truth: if the helots ever rose together, Sparta could bleed from the inside out. That is why Spartan toughness always had a shadow side. It wasn't only discipline, it was fear management. The famous calm, the ritualized violence, the surveillance, the cryptic silences. All of it sat on top of a demographic terror. Too few rulers, too many ruled. So imagine hearing this rumor: one of the most famous Spartans alive might be promising them freedom. True or false, that accusation was radioactive. It transformed Pausanias from arrogant commander into potential regime breaker. And once a state starts imagining you as an existential threat, facts become less important than possibilities. That's the moment danger changes shape. You are no longer being judged for what you did. You are being judged for what you might become. Isn't that how power still works now? A government can survive a scandal. It can survive corruption. What it fears most is the insider who can realign loyalties, the decorated hero, the man with credibility at the top and appeal at the bottom. That combination terrifies systems. And Pausanias, guilty or not, looked exactly like that kind of man. Still, Sparta needed proof. Not gossip, not resentment, something harder, something undeniable. Proof arrived in the hands of a courier who made one intelligent, terrified decision. Pausanias had reportedly been using personal messengers to carry secret letters, but this messenger noticed a pattern. The men sent before him never came back. No return, no reward, no explanation. They simply vanished into history. That is when instinct took over, not heroism. Instinct. The oldest survival mechanism there is. If everyone before you disappeared, don't walk forward blind. So he opened the letter, and inside was a future written in someone else's confidence. A letter allegedly tying Pausanias to Persian intrigue, a promise of cooperation, a suggestion of reward, and, according to the tradition that survived, an instruction that the messenger himself should be killed once the delivery was complete. He was reading his own death order. Picture the feeling, your fingers holding the page, your pulse hammering, the realization arriving all at once. You are not a trusted servant. You are a disposable witness. Would you deliver that letter? He didn't. He ran it straight to the ephors, the Spartan magistrates who monitored even kings. Now, logically, that should have ended the story. But Sparta did what rigid states often do when confronted with explosive truth. It hesitated, because arresting Pausanias was not administratively simple. He was still elite, still royal blood, still the victor of Plataea. Destroying a man like that in public could split loyalties, raise questions, maybe even make him more dangerous. So they chose something colder than arrest. They chose confirmation. A trap was built. The courier would meet Pausanias and confront him. Nearby, the ephors would hide and listen. Not rumor, not document alone. A live confession. Words they could hear with their own ears. It is such a cinematic scene because it compresses the whole Greek political world into one breathless setup. A frightened messenger, a compromised hero, and magistrates crouched in concealment waiting for a sentence that will change history. The messenger approached. He showed fear, confusion. He let Pausanias believe reassurance was still possible. And here the story becomes almost unbelievable in its arrogance. Pausanias did not explode. He did not deny. He did not tear the accusation apart. He tried to soothe him, promised safety, told him to proceed, as if a man already used to escaping consequences simply could not imagine the walls finally closing. The ephors heard enough. At last they moved, and even then Sparta still revealed its own strange weakness, not speed, delay, discussion, procedure. The machine that looked so terrifying from the outside was still human inside, cautious, political, calculating. Long enough for Pausanias to sense the shift. Long enough for him to run. Where do you go when your own city wants you gone? Not far. There was no easy escape. No harbor of safety. No loyal faction ready to raise banners for him. So Pausanias ran to the one place where force hesitated. The sanctuary of Athena Chakiokis, the bronze house. Sacred ground. In Greek religion, a suppliant inside a sanctuary was not just hiding. He was under divine protection. To seize him, there meant pollution, not metaphorical guilt, actual contamination in the minds of the people, famine, defeat, divine anger, a stain on the whole city. Pausanias knew this. The ephors knew this. Everyone knew the rules. So for a moment, the pursuit stopped. Imagine the scene. Inside the temple, a war hero turned fugitive, chest heaving, surrounded by sacred silence. Outside, state officials armed with authority they cannot quite use. It is a perfect Greek crisis law against religion, survival against taboo, the state against the gods. Then Sparta found its loophole, and the loophole was monstrous. They would not drag him out. They would not spill blood inside. They would not violate the sanctuary directly. They would simply remove the roof and close the exit. Tiles lifted away. Beams streaked back, sunlight pouring down where shelter had been. Then the doorway began to shrink, stone by stone, hand by hand, a legal fiction built into a death sentence. This is what makes the scene unforgettable. It is not rage. It is administration, measured labor, no frenzy, no sword swings. Just men doing careful work while another man calculates how much air remains. And inside that shrinking chamber, Pausanias had time to think, time to replay Plataea, time to remember the cheers, time to test every excuse against the sound of another stone locking into place. That kind of death is psychological before it is physical. First denial, then bargaining, then the horrible understanding that nobody is coming. Which is more frightening, violence or calm cruelty? Pausanias had once stood against the largest empire on earth. Now he stood inside a holy building, watching daylight narrow to a slit. He could probably still hear voices outside. Instructions, footsteps, stone touching stone. Maybe at first he believed they would stop. Maybe he thought rank would save him. Maybe he thought the city that needed his victory could never endure his death. Then his mother arrived. Ancient tradition preserves the detail because it lands like a blade. No pleading, no collapse, no dramatic defense of her son. She carried a stone to the entrance and placed it there herself. That one gesture did what law and politics could not. It broke the last hesitation in the crowd. If even his mother would help seal the doorway, who else could object? One stone. That's all she needed. And just like that, Pausanias lost the final human hope every condemned person reaches for. Someone, somewhere, will still choose me. No one did. The wall closed. No food. No water. No rescue. Time became the executioner. Not seconds, days. Think about the psychology of that death. No battle trance. No quick wound. No glorious last charge. Just waiting. First, then weakness, then confusion, then the body turning against itself, inside a sacred place that offered holiness but not mercy. Night falling without a roof, cold air, morning heat, dust on the tongue, prayer maybe, regret maybe, or maybe only the raw animal instinct every human shares when the body realizes it has been abandoned. He had escaped the sword only to be handed to time, and that wasn't even the final humiliation. According to the tradition, the Spartans removed him only when he was near death or just dying, so the sanctuary itself would not technically be polluted by a corpse inside. Even now they were managing procedure, managing optics, managing religion, as if enough legal precision could bleach blood out of conscience. But the gods apparently were not impressed. Afterwards, Sparta faced the backlash of divine pollution anyway. The Delphic oracle declared that what had happened demanded atonement. So the same city that sealed Pausanias inside a temple had to honor him after death. Bronze memorials, heroic burial traditions. A strange, almost guilty respect returned to the man they had just finished erasing. That contradiction is the entire story in miniature. Sparta wanted him condemned, but not fully forgotten. Punished, but still useful. Dead, but not dishonored beyond repair. Because states often need their traitors to remain partly heroic. Otherwise, they must admit they destroy their own legends, and the political consequences kept spreading. Spartan prestige with allies had already been fraying. Ionian cities had little desire to be handled by another commander who acted like the tyrants they thought they were escaping. Athens stepped into that opening with alarming speed. Ship by ship, alliance by alliance, influence migrated. The wider Greek balance shifted. Pausanias did not single-handedly cause that transformation, but his fall became one of those hinge moments when a civilization reveals the crack running through its image. Sparta looked disciplined from a distance. Under pressure, it looked afraid. Afraid of Persia. Afraid of helots. Afraid of ambition. Afraid of one decorated insider deciding he no longer belonged inside the cage. So was Pausanias truly guilty? Maybe. Maybe he really did dream of Persian alliance, royal marriage, and power beyond Spartan limits. Maybe victory intoxicated him until he confused himself with destiny. Or maybe some charges swelled in the retelling because Sparta needed an explanation for losing influence to Athens. History leaves room for doubt. But Sparta's method reveals certainty about one thing. It believed Pausanias had become too dangerous to leave in motion. That is why this story still bites, because the ending is bigger than one man. It's about what institutions do when a hero stops behaving like a symbol and starts behaving like a rival. We still do this. We celebrate people when they protect the system. We fear them when they outgrow it. We forgive arrogance while it delivers results, then act shocked when the same traits become threatening. We build legends fast. We dismantle them faster. And once a society decides a person is dangerous, morality often becomes technical. Not, is this right? But can we justify it? That is why this ancient story feels modern. Because reputations still rise on public need and die on institutional fear. Because the line between savior and threat is often drawn by whoever controls the wall. And because crowds still love certainty, even when certainty is built on panic. That question never really died in Sparta. It just learned to wear better clothes. So remember Pausanias the next time you hear about a hero destroyed by the world he helped defend. Remember the temple. Remember the slow war. Remember the mother's stone. Because sometimes the most revealing moment in history is not when a civilization defeats its enemies. It's when it decides what to do with its own inconvenient savior. If this story pulled you in, subscribe to the History and Fact and like the video. Because this channel is built for the dark corners of history people think they already understand until they really look. Pausanias once helped stop an empire. In the end, he couldn't stop a doorway from getting smaller. And that is the cruelty of power. It remembers usefulness, not loyalty. Heroes terrify systems when they stop obeying. Sparta feared his future more than his past.